Diversion Authority Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, August 26th. We will begin with a roll call vote of the members, please.
Mayor Dardis.
Here.
Dr. Mahoney. Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Costin.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Commissioner Haney here for Ms. Johnson.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Gehrig. Ms. McCall.
Here.
That
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order of business is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting, that being July 22nd.
Steen moves to approve.
I'll second it.
Steen moves, Hendrickson seconds. Is there any discussion? Again, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Mr. Haney.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 3 is the approval of the bills. Mr. Costin.
Yes, for the record, the bills approval list for the month is $4,167,309.83. You'll recognize most of the vendors listed here. There's a couple of reimbursements to the Clay County entity, the Moorhead Clay County Joint Powers Authority. And other than that, I didn't have any comments on the bills.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Any questions for Mr. Costin from the committee? I'd entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Mr. Jacobson moves. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Montplaisir seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the bills as presented at our August 26th meeting. Is there any discussion? We'll proceed to vote. Don, if you would, roll call, please.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Mr. Haney.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 4 is a financial report. That'll be shared with us with Mr. Montplaisir. Or Mr. Costa.
Yeah, I'd be happy to go through that. Thank you, Chair. The financial statement for the month, in 2020, we spent $34,870,000 and $683, and a cumulative total for the project of $569,548,203. If you flip to the next page, the statement of net position, we have a net position of $87,835,159 as resources available for the project. You go to the next report, that shows the year-to-date totals as compared to the budget, and we're comfortably under budget in the expense category as opposed to the elapsed, 58% would be through July. So we are doing fine on budget. Other than that, the rest of the reports are there as detailed. That would be the extent of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Are there any questions of Mr. Costin and the financial report? All right. I'd accept a motion, please.
I'll move approval, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Redlinger moves. Is there a second, please?
Haney seconds.
Mr. Montplaisir, second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Don, will you please do a roll call vote?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Mr. Haney.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next order of business is item number 5, the Executive Director Financial Report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if this is being shared with the folks online? Yep, okay, there we go. Thank you. All right, so as Mr. Costin had mentioned, budget is still looking very good. We're running significantly under budget this year. Cost to date are 43 million compared to the forecast year full annual budget of 138. And we have total program costs to date of 569 million. Just want to show a couple of the areas where we're running under budget and give an explanation. The legal management and procurement is still on track as budgeted. Southern Embankment Infrastructure Project is still on track. A majority of the where we're running under budget would be contained in the in-town flood projects. So you can see we've had $3 million expended to date for a $24 million budget. And then the lands acquisition and mitigation. You can see we've expended about a little over a third of our yearly budget. We do anticipate a number of lands actions between now and the end of the year. So that's going to, in the next few months, you're going to see a lot of activity in our lands program. But I just wanted to kind of show why we're running under budget and take any questions if there were any. Other than that, there isn't any other cause for concern. Everything else is running under budget, but running as anticipated. So I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Is there any questions, Mr. Paulson, with regard to the financial report? All right, thank you. The next order of business is item number 6. Mr. Paulson again on contracting actions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one contracting action for Finance Committee approval today. It is an MSA and Task Order 3 for Risk Management Advisory Services. This is an insurance advisory service contract that we've had with ANON. And the task order would be for $90,000.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Is there any questions, Mr. Paulson, with regard to Aon Professional Services, MSA, and Task Order 3? All right. You'd entertain a motion, please.
Steen, move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Steen. Is there a second, please?
This is Chuck, I'll second.
Peterson, second.
Mr. Hendrickson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve Aon's Professional Service, MSA, and Task Order Number 3 as presented by Mr. Paulson. Is there any further discussion? If you would, please, Don, call a roll call.
Mayor Dardis.
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson.
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson.
Yes.
Mr. Costin.
Yes.
Mr. Haney.
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Additional information on contracting actions, Mr. Paulson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is for information only. I did approve one task order amendment for AECOM for $28,000. This is in regards for additional cultural investigation on some additional properties. And then I'll report out the Cass County Joint Water Resource District also approved Task Order 1, Amendment 4 for additional property appraisal services in the amount of $56,890. And the MCC JPA is anticipated to approve a Task Order Amendment 1 for property acquisition and relocation services. And that is a zero cost of budget amendment. So that is all I have for you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Next order of business is other business. And the next order is Ide Bailey's audit results and a presentation by Jamie Fay with Ide Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my name is Jamie Fay. I am a partner with Ide Bailey, and I believe the PowerPoint that I have is pulling up. So we completed the audit for the Diversion Authority. It was a 3-year audit in conjunction with the WIFI loan. So the audit was as of December 31st of 17, 18, and 19. We worked through all of the procedures, and so I'm here to just tell you a little bit about that and how that went. So if we go to the third slide, click through audit results. So really to talk to you about what an audit is, what came out of as results. So the audit opinion, if you go to the next one, the audit opinion, we come in as auditors and we test the balances that you have. We test the financial statements and give an opinion on if it's materially accurate or not. What that means is we set a materiality threshold, we do some testing, we do some scoping, we do some detail testing, and then we give an opinion. You received a clean opinion, which is an unmodified opinion. That's what you want and what you've gotten in the past. That gives you the opinion saying these financial statements are materially accurate. And they are fairly presented. The city staff helped to get those financial statements all prepared. So we got those documents and just ensured that what we were testing agreed with those documents. This is an auditor's professional opinion. So it's based on the work that we do and whether they're prepared in accordance with the standards. And so you received a clean opinion on that. So the next slide is going to talk about audit procedures. So really when you do an audit, what does that look like? So we have a few high-level things we do. We start very first and foremost with a risk assessment. So where are the risks in each audit that we do? Each entity is a little bit different on how they operate. There's different risks in different places. And as far as what that looks like, that's how we kind of build our procedures. From there, we determine, do we test transactions at a granular level? Meaning, do we get invoices? Do we look at those types of approvals? I will say from a level of effort standpoint, the staff helped us to test over 900 expenditure transactions over the 3 years. So that's a pretty significant number. But really where the risks lie in this audit, that's where we felt we needed to spend our time. And I'm happy to note that there were no findings that came out of that. Anything we did have questions on, we were able to work through and get those answers. So for the transactions, that's what that looks like. In addition to that, we do some analytical calculations, meaning we take a look and say, okay, what are the trends that we're seeing either in this entity or in the industry? What do we expect for these balances to be? And then are they actually close to that expectation? If not, what do those differences look like? We did a number of those analytical calculations. In addition to that, we do some work around internal controls and what's called walkthroughs. So that's really to look at what are the controls in place surrounding the disbursement process, surrounding the bank reconciliation process, making sure that there's not one person responsible for all of those steps. If there is issues with that, it's called segregation of duties issues, meaning there's one person doing too many things. For example, if you had one person taking in cash as well as depositing the cash, that would be an issue because nobody else would be involved in that process. Again, happy to note there was no findings there that we had reported. And then from a walkthrough perspective, what we do is we pick a number of areas and we do one transaction. We really step it through at a granular level, even if we're not doing a transaction testing in that area. So that would be really making sure, okay, here's what you say you have for controls. This is what the control is. We can see that it's being done. Here's the approval or whatever that looks like. and really tracing that through. And in doing that, we really placed a high reliance on, hey, here's what the controls look like. We were able to work with the city. And I know that, if there's plans to grow the staff at the Diversion Authority in the future, that's something to keep in mind, because the procedures that the city has put in place is, their procedures and has to do with their staff. So if we're going to migrate some of these processes, just making sure there's still strong internal controls and still really good approval processes. And if you ever have questions on any of that, we're happy to help talk through some of that, as well as I know the city has a really good handle on that from our interactions with them. So that's just something to keep in mind. So from an audit procedure standpoint, that's really what we dug into. We did not test every single transaction. We did not look at every single item in the GL. And I like to point that out because sometimes people think auditors look at every single thing, which we don't. But we did look at, like I said, we looked at over 900 expenditure transactions. We looked at a fair amount in there. So that's what we did from an audit procedure standpoint. So the next thing I want to talk about is those financial statements, so the numbers. So the first thing looking at the financial statements is equity in pooled investments is what it's called. Essentially, that's cash. Since the authority's cash is really in with the city's cash, it's called equity in pooled investments because it's kind of a pooled cash situation where they're all together. If you go to the next slide, it has the numbers. So for 2017, 18, and 19, you can see these were the numbers. So 2019 was about 83.7 million. And this really is just at the end of the year, what the cash is. And this can fluctuate a little bit depending on what do your receivables look like, what do your payables look like. But this is just to give you an idea what it looks like for the 3 years. And the next one is looking at the next slide is looking at the statement of activities. So really, what were the ins and outs of the Diversion Authority? So we have on here revenues, expenses, and investment income. And then that top dashed line is the net position. So really, revenues and expenses are what did you take in? What did you have going out? Investment income is exactly what it sounds like. It's earnings on those investments. And you can see the net position is growing a little bit. Kind of over the 3 years. And this will ebb and flow again. I know if you've got, big transactions coming up, maybe you build some of that net position and then it drops a little bit if you have some big expenditures and then maybe it grows again. So there's not a right answer for where that needs to be. This is just giving you an idea of where that comes from. And I wanted to point out too, it's not in the PowerPoint exactly, but when you look at the financial statements, something you'll notice is that the financial statements are fairly limited. There is cash, there's intergovernmental receivables. So basically what are dollars you have coming yet to you in cash, interest receivable, some prepaid items, and then a few payables. What you won't see on there, at least not yet, there's no debt because this was for the WIFI loan application. And then there's also no fixed assets on there. Fixed assets meaning property, plant, or equipment, or construction in progress. And we did a lot of research really to back up the decision of the authority to not have that on there because essentially all of the construction that's happening ends up not within the authority. So there really isn't property to hold on to in the financial statements. So really putting it on the authority's financial statements really wouldn't be indicative of what that is looking like from a title perspective, where it's going. So you'll see any of the expenditures that you would expect, the purchases, the construction, that all flows through as expenses on the Diversion Authority's books. So I just wanted to point that out in case you take a look at those financials and have any questions on there. And with that, if you take a look at the financials and ever have any questions, we've got good information in there, but I'm willing and ready to take any questions you have, because that's all I have to walk through with you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Questions from the committee? Anyone?
I didn't have any questions, but I did have a comment. I wanted to thank Ide Bailey for their willingness to step up on this. It was a short ask with regard to reassigning the resources to get the audit completed for the WIFIA project, as well as my own staff that set all priorities aside until this was completed because this was our top priority. So again, thanks to those people that worked on the audit process. We're very pleased that it produced a very positive and clean result.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Anyone else? Any questions? Ide Bailey? Ms. Fay? On behalf of
Just
the...
a question.
Please.
I'm sorry. Just a question. I know, Joe, we're looking for somebody to do finances. If Mike and Kent are doing such a good job, what will this person do in addition to that?
Well, thank you, Mayor, for the question. So we are, I'm working with Mr. Montplaisir and Mr. Costin right now on defining the roles and responsibilities of the diversion finance director position. The city of Fargo as a fiscal agent is going above and beyond right now and doing a number of activities that aren't traditional fiscal agent activities. So a lot of those items will be moved over to the Diversion Authority and put under the responsibility of the Diversion Authority Finance Director. And I think Mr. Montplaisir and Mr. Costin could probably explain a plethora of activities that this new individual is going to be undertaking. It really is going to be a pretty big job. So,
Additional questions? This is an information item only. The Diversion Authority Board will act on this tomorrow. I too, on behalf of the Diversion Finance Committee, Mr. Costin, to you and your staff, to all that you did with assisting in this audit, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anything else for Ms. Fay? Thank you, and thank you to Ide Bailey.
Yep, thank you.
Next order of business is a WIFI update. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today, I just wanted to provide a brief update to the Finance Committee regarding the second rating that we'll need for the WIFI loan. We are intending to close on the WIFI loan within the next couple of months. That specific date has not quite been set yet. That's dependent upon US EPA WIFI. We're currently in what's referred to as the due diligence process. We've completed the financial due diligence, the legal due diligence, and now we are working on the technical due diligence associated with the loan. As part of the EPA rules, we're required to obtain a second rating from a nationally recognized rating agency. So our first ratings was from Moody's. That was an indicative rating that will transfer into a permanent rating. The fee for that was about $175,000. That is based upon the size of the loan, which is $561 million. And so we are currently looking to S&P to provide the second rating. Our team has been negotiating with S&P to reduce their cost for the rating, since one rating has already been issued, and this is not like a traditional bond rating in which it's just a rating for a public agency and there's not as much liability involved in it. So we've been able to negotiate the price down to approximately $125,000. We don't have that in writing yet because they verbally confirmed that, and we're waiting for that in writing. So I wanted to provide an update to the board on that. We'd previously had a resolution authorizing the payment of those fees, but I felt that it was such a large fee that should at least update the board. And if you had questions before, if you saw a check for $125,000 go out, you're not asking what is that about. So can answer any questions regarding the WIFI process or the ratings. It's more information today.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any questions of Mr. Shockley? Thank you, sir. Under item number 7, the next item is property acquisition status report. Mr. Dodds is going to give that for us.
Hi, good afternoon, committee members and chair. In your packet is the property acquisition status report. This is a routine report that we produce on a monthly basis for the benefit of the land committee, the finance committee, the acquiring agencies, as well as the diversion board. The first page is more just a snapshot to orientate yourself with the project. I'd really focus your attention on the second page of that report, which is a map showing the overall status of the program. A few things here to point out for you. We continue to make progress, sort of slow and steady progress. The joint board has been working hard and trying to reach deals with all the properties that we needed for the channel, Southern Embankment Reach 1, and the I-29 road raise. On that map on the second page of the report, you see the green colored parcels and a number 395 behind that. So we're closing in quickly on 400 parcels acquired, sort of a big moment there. You'll also notice that there's a red color that we have 2 parcels where the Cass County Joint Board has asked the County Commission for authorization to use eminent domain. So far, there's been two events where we've been to the County Commission and the county has granted the authorization to utilize eminent domain. As of the date of this report, 2 of those filings have been submitted with the court, and so you'll likely see an uptick of that, unfortunately, as the months go on here this fall. The rest of that packet is information for you to view. Happy to answer any questions if you have any. Otherwise, nothing else specific that I would report at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Dodds. Any questions from the committee? We'll move on to the land acquisition directive for the wetlands project. Again,
Yeah.
Mr. Dodds?
Yes, thank you. In your packet is a land acquisition directive. I would also let you know that we did hand out an update to that to those who are in attendance here, and I do have the other version, the updated version on the screen. Earlier yesterday, we did receive the final real estate drawings from the Corps for this Drain 27 wetland project. And there were a few things that had changed in the last, sort of final hours of developing those real estate drawings. And so we wanted to update this land acquisition directive to reflect those latest changes. This land acquisition directive is for parcels that are impacted by the wetland project. There's a map in your packet, the 3rd page of this land acquisition directives, that shows you the parcels in the area that's impacted. And the addition that we've added since the original one went out is this parcel labeled as number 25. That's a residential and commercial property in the staging area. Ultimately, it will need to be acquired. There's just a portion of that parcel that will be impacted by the wetland project, but I guess it's our recommendation that we proceed with doing the full buyout of that parcel sooner rather than later, or at least get authorized to do so. Otherwise, if we buy it in parts, it may end up being more cumbersome than necessary. And so the total amount of the updated land acquisition directive is $8,657,000. The other change that was made is that we have included some dollars for the temporary construction easements that will be needed for the wetland project as well. And so the process for this is that we bring these directives through the Finance Committee, and if they're approved by the Finance Committee, then it's handed off to the Joint Board so that they know and have authorization to go ahead and spend these dollars to buy these parcels. So I would ask for your approval of this directive.
Thank you, Mr. Dodds. Any questions for him? This is an actionable item. To entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Was that Mayor Mahoney?
Yes, that was.
All right, Mayor Mahoney moves. Is there a second, please?
Commissioner Haney.
Commissioner Haney seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the land acquisition directive for the wetlands project as presented by Mr. Dodds. Is there any further discussion? All right. Don, could you please do a roll call vote?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes?
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hendrickson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Mr. Haney,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir. Yes. Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Ms. McCall.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Next order is the Rural Impact Mitigation Program Forgivable Loan Term Sheet. Mr. Dodds again.
Yeah, thank you once again. So in our mitigation plan, we have a situation where we have rural businesses and rural farmsteads that we will need to acquire and displace because of the project. And a couple months ago, we brought forward to the Land Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Diversion Board a program associated with providing those displaced property owners with a forgivable loan to help them cover the costs associated with building a new facility. And this would be applicable when they're displaced by the project and when there isn't an existing farmstead available for them to relocate into. And so we're finding ourselves in a situation where we might need to help them find a replacement property. And so over the last few months here, after the board and committees have approved that, we've been working, Mr. Shockley and myself and a few members of his team have been working to put the details together on the term sheets, a mortgage note, as well as a promissory note that the borrowers would have from the Diversion Authority. The details of that are still being ironed out, but I'm happy to say that we're making good progress. We also, I guess, would report that we have a number of these rural businesses and farmsteads that are expressing interest in that program, and they're wanting to understand how all the details are going to unfold. We do anticipate that the Diversion Authority will end up holding a mortgage on these properties, and it'll likely end up being a secondary mortgage. And so anytime we hold a mortgage, of course, there's some risk that the borrower defaults on a loan, for example. In the event that those things would happen, John and his team have laid out a handful of options or remedies that we would have at our disposal, much like any other holder of a mortgage. So I feel like we're in a good position here. We feel like we have confidence that this program will be effective. I know John has expressed to me and probably to many of you that he's got experience using these types of forgivable loans in other situations, and they've really worked out well. I will also tell you that our land agents who are out visiting with these property owners, the business owners, have really expressed a lot of interest in this program as well. They think it'll be really helpful to help us acquire the properties in a more favorable fashion, so we don't have to take unnecessary actions. So no real action here for you today, but happy to answer any questions. I guess moving forward, we did share this update with the Land Committee as well, and Commissioner Shirley asked that this is sort of a lands policy type topic. She asked that we bring forward the term sheets and other factors through the Land Committee for their blessing and concurrence. So.
Okay. Questions from Mr. Dodds? Do you have any idea how many properties might be affected by this program?
When we had presented this to the board a couple months ago, we had estimated that there was probably 24, whether there were farmsteads or rural businesses. That was based on our estimate at the time. I still feel confident with that estimate, but recognize that we have not been out and visited with every rural property owner, and so there could be some unforeseen actions that happen.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dodds. Any other questions? Thank you. Next order is the North Dakota SWC cost share application. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give a little bit of background and context on this item. So I think we all are aware of the impacts of COVID on the oil markets in North Dakota. And we're all aware that the funding from the state of North Dakota comes through the Resources Trust Fund, which is funded solely by oil tax revenues. In June 16th, I received a letter from the acting state engineer asking what kind of funds we were going to be requesting from our 2019 appropriations, which was $66.5 million. Those appropriations come through the State Water Commission as through the Resources Trust Fund, contingent upon the money being there. It was indicated to us that there may not be enough revenue coming into the Resources Trust Fund to complete the $66.5 million obligation if we were to make that request and draw on those funds. And so the request from the state engineer was what sort of request would we have, and could we defer any of our requests from those 2019 dollars? So we went back and we looked at our carryover funds. We looked at what we were anticipating to expend in the 2019 to 2021 biennium. And we identified approximately $22.5 million that could be deferred and requested through appropriations at a later date. And so the cost share application that I have in the finance packet reflects that deferment of the $22.5 million. I would also note that this does consolidate our 2017 funds and our 2019 funds into one cost share agreement, which does allow us to submit for reimbursement for a number of items that we've been holding on to, and will give us the opportunity to draw down some of our carryover funds and free up some available cash. So overall, I think it shows we can be flexible in our arrangement in working with the state, given the dire circumstances that they're up against. Incidentally, I think I can happily report that there's been some recovery in the oil markets, and we're starting to see that revenue start to grow back again. But it certainly will cause some revenue issues this year with the Resources Trust Fund. So with that, there's no approval necessary, but I just wanted to report out to the Finance Committee and answer any questions that anyone might have about that.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Any questions? All right, thank you. Our next meeting will be September 23rd. Same place, same time. Is there anything any of the Finance Committee members would like to address the group on? Mr. Costa.
I just had one issue with regard to the discussion we had when we initially talked about procuring audit services. We were behind the gun, so to speak, on the calendar, and so we just appointed Ide Bailey as our auditor for this 3-year period. There was some discussion at that time that shouldn't we competitively procure that service? So I put that out there that if that's our intent to do that, which it certainly could be, that's something that the management staff should be working on so that we don't have another rush job at the end of the year and just default to the current provider. So I just bring that up as a historical item that probably needs to be thought through.
Thank you, Mr. Costin. Anyone else in the committee have anything for the good of the order? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Mr. Montplaisir moves. Is there a second? Mr. Jacobson seconds. Been moved and seconded. We stand adjourned. Thank you.